What if the blade had struck not from the hands of a Targaryen loyalist or a reluctant lover, but from the shadows, silent and unseen, wielded by the girl who had no name? Imagine it, Arya Stark, walking past the Unsullied like a whispering wind, eyes fixed on the Queen of Ashes as she stood before the Iron Throne, drunk on the fire she had unleashed. The bells still echoed in the minds of the people, the screams of the innocent not yet forgotten, and Arya, covered in ash and blood, had seen it all. She had watched the city burn beneath dragon fire. She had watched children die, not in battle, but in fear. She had watched mercy die in Daenerys Targaryen's eyes. The moment the blade pierced Daenerys' ribs, quick, clean, final, the world shifted. It wasn't a lover's betrayal. It wasn't whispered promises of peace or love. It was justice, cold, precise, and personal. Arya didn't say a word. Not when Daenerys gasped, not when Drogon roared above in sudden pain and fury. The throne room shook with fire and fury, but Arya didn't flinch. She had stared death in the face 1,000 times. This was just one more. And Jon? He was late, just moments too late. He arrived in time to see the body collapse onto the cold stones, the dagger in her chest still warm. Arya stood over Daenerys' corpse, face unreadable, heart racing but hand steady. She didn't look at him, not right away. When she finally did, the pain in his eyes was undeniable. It wasn't for Daenerys, not entirely. It was for what was lost now, what would come next, what Arya had forced upon them all. "You were going to do it," Arya said, her voice low, no apology in it. "I saw it in your eyes. You just took too long." Jon didn't speak, not for a long time. The silence between them was heavier than the dragon's wings. And Drogon, feeling the loss of his queen, shrieked into the sky, a cry so primal it shook the walls. Flames burst from his mouth, melting steel, torching the bones of the throne itself. But he didn't strike Arya. He sniffed her, rage in his eyes, fire trembling in his chest. And then he flew. The throne was gone. The queen was dead. And Westeros had no ruler. Okay, pause. Did anyone else just get chills? Because what happens next literally broke my brain the first time I thought about it. You'd think Arya just saved the realm, right? Wrong. This is where it really gets crazy. Grey Worm was the first to arrive. His face didn't change when he saw Daenerys lying dead, but his sword was drawn in a second. The Unsullied flooded the throne room. Arya didn't resist. She didn't run. She didn't flinch. "I did what needed to be done," she told them. They didn't care. Jon stepped between her and the Unsullied, not out of loyalty, not out of love, but because he knew what Daenerys had become. Still, it didn't matter. To Grey Worm, the queen had been murdered, and Jon Snow had let it happen. Arya was taken, not executed. Not yet. Jon insisted on it. Tyrion, still in prison, was dragged into the debate, and so began the chaos. The lords and ladies of Westeros were summoned again. The Dragon Queen was dead, killed by a Stark. The North had already declared independence. Now they were forced to answer for one of their own. And Sansa? She was ready. Wait, what? Arya kills Daenerys. Jon arrives too late. Drogon destroys the throne. And now Grey Worm wants blood? Oh, this is just getting started. Sansa stood tall at the gathering. Daenerys burned the city. Arya stopped her from burning the world. Some agreed. Others did not. Yara Greyjoy was furious. She was our queen. That was murder. She was a tyrant, Davos replied. If Arya hadn't done it, someone else would have. But would they? The question hung heavy in the air. What Arya had done wasn't political. It wasn't strategic. It was personal. And that made it dangerous. If a single person could decide who lived and died, what ruler was safe? Samwell tried to calm the room. Let's not forget what she did. She saved lives. And ended a queen's, Brienne said quietly. Whether we liked her or not, she had just won the war. The room cracked under the weight of that truth. Meanwhile, Arya waited. Imprisoned but unbroken. Okay, we've got emotional tension, political chaos. And now the biggest question of all, what do they do with Arya Stark? Trust me, what happens next is going to flip the entire world of Westeros upside down. The cell was dark, But Arya didn't mind the shadows. She had lived among them, become one with them. Now they pressed around her like old friends, silent, watchful, waiting. Chains hung loose around her wrists, more for formality than restraint. If she wanted to escape, she could, but she stayed, because running would prove she was guilty. And Arya Stark wasn't guilty, not in her eyes. Outside her cell, Westeros trembled. The Unsullied tightened their grip on the city. Grey Worm barely spoke, but his orders were cold and unrelenting. No one entered Arya's chamber without his approval. No one but Jon. He came 3 days later, his face harder than before. Grief and guilt etched across it. He didn't bring food, didn't offer comfort, just stared at her through the iron bars like she was someone he no longer recognized. "You should have let me do it," he said. "You wouldn't have," Arya replied. "I would have," he snapped, more to himself than to her. "I had to." "But you didn't," she said, calm. "You hesitated." "I didn't." Jon clenched his fists. "You don't get to decide who lives and dies." Arya's eyes narrowed. Says the man who killed his queen. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. He hadn't killed her, but in the eyes of Westeros, would that matter? Daenerys Targaryen was dead, and 2 Starks had been the only ones near her when she died. It wouldn't take much for the world to decide they both shared the blame, and Grey Worm was already sharpening the blade of justice. And here is where it gets insane. The real threat? It wasn't just the Unsullied. It was a council of Westeros, fractured, furious, and hungry for stability. And what they did next would change the realm forever. Tyrion Lannister was brought before the lords and ladies in chains once again, but this time not as a prisoner, as an advisor. The last one who understood Daenerys. The only one who could speak without being silenced. He stood before the small council. Sansa, Sam, Brienne, Yara, Gendry, Ser Davos, Robb and Arryn, Edmure Tully, and a few others. Grey Worm watched from the side, silent, dangerous. "We need to decide what happens to Arya Stark," Tyrion began. Yara stood immediately. "She murdered our queen. Justice must be served." "And what justice did the queen serve the people of King's Landing?" Sansa replied sharply. "She rained fire on the innocent. Arya stopped her from doing it again." "She wasn't yours to stop," Yara hissed. "She sat the Iron Throne." "There is no Iron Throne." Davos cut in. "Not anymore." Silence. Tyrion let the tension grow before stepping forward. "This isn't just about Arya. It's about Westeros. If we punish her, we risk the North's wrath. If we let her go, we insult the Unsullied and every kingdom that bent the knee. The realm needs balance, and the realm needs a ruler." And just like that, the conversation shifted. Forget Arya. Now it was about power. "You guys feeling this?" Arya's fate is hanging by a thread. And the question of who rules next is about to explode into betrayal, alliances, and maybe another war. You're not going to believe where this is going. Back in her cell, Arya sat cross-legged on the stone floor. Her thoughts didn't wander to escape plans or political fallout. She wasn't like Sansa. She wasn't like Jon. She didn't play the game. She ended threats. That's what she did. It's what she was trained for. She thought of her list. All of them gone now, either by her hand or time. She had never planned on surviving all of this. And yet, here she was. She heard the door creak open. She didn't look up. The footsteps were light, but purposeful. It was Sansa. "You shouldn't have done it," Sansa said, voice cold. Arya looked up. "And if I hadn't, I would have found another way," Sansa said. Arya almost smiled. "Another way that didn't involve blood?" Sansa didn't answer. "You're not angry because I killed Daenerys," Arya said. "You're angry because now you have to deal with the mess." Sansa's silence confirmed it. Outside, the city still smoked in places. King's Landing was a graveyard. But power doesn't wait for morning. The North to reach the Iron Islands, they were all watching. Sansa turned to leave, but paused. "They want to send you across the sea. Exile." Arya tilted her head. "You gonna let them?" "If it keeps the peace," Sansa said. "Yes." Arya laughed once, bitterly. "There's never peace. Only breathing room." Arya didn't fight the decision. She didn't argue, didn't plead. When the ruling came from the council, she simply nodded, like she'd known all along this was where it would end. Exile, not death, not imprisonment, not a Stark's head on a pike. No, that would have been too clean, too easy. This was humiliation dressed as mercy. A quiet way to remove the realm's most dangerous blade without spilling more blood. She was to be taken far west, beyond the known maps. A single ship, no companions, no promises of return. Her name would not be spoken again in royal halls. She was to disappear like she never existed. And Jon? He said nothing when the verdict was delivered, not a word when they shackled her wrists in front of the small council. His eyes were unreadable, his posture rigid. When Arya passed him on the way out of the chamber, she slowed for a heartbeat. "You were supposed to be different," she said quietly. Jon flinched, a better Stark than the rest. And then she was gone. Wait, pause. Did you feel that? Arya's being cast out like a threat to peace. And Jon, our brooding, honorable Jon, just stood there. Why didn't he stop it? And what does that silence really mean? Keep watching. This rabbit hole only gets darker. The ship left before dawn, shrouded in fog and secrecy. Grey Worm personally escorted her aboard, flanked by two silent Unsullied. He didn't speak to her, not once. But just before the plank was pulled, he stepped close enough for her to smell the steel in his armor. "You are lucky," he said low. "Very lucky." Arya looked him in the eyes. "No, you are, because if I'd wanted to disappear, you wouldn't have caught me." It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. And with that, she was gone. Waves rocked the ship gently as Westeros faded into mist. Arya stood at the bow, wind in her hair, staring into the endless gray. She felt no fear, no anger, just a cold certainty that everything she fought for, every death she had dealt, had led her here, to exile, to silence, to nothing. But remember what I said earlier? This isn't a story about justice. It's a story about consequences. And Arya's exile? Yeah, that little solution just set fire to every fragile alliance left in Westeros. In Winterfell, Sansa sat alone in the Godswood. The message had come by Raven. Arya had departed. The exile was real. Bran had said nothing. Of course, the boy who became the three-eyed Raven had turned silence into strategy. He didn't intervene, didn't advise, just watched, always watched. But Sansa was starting to realize something terrifying. By allowing Arya to be exiled, she had bought political peace, but shattered something far more dangerous. Family. The North remembered. The North always remembered. And Arya Stark wasn't just a name. She was the ghost of vengeance. The girl who killed the Night King. The faceless one. A Stark who acted not from pride, but from necessity. And now, they treated her like a traitor. Already, murmurs spread through the North. Discontent festered. Some said the Queen in the North had betrayed her sister. Others whispered that the South had demanded too much, and Sansa had bowed too quickly. And Jon? He was unraveling. Okay, can we talk about Jon Snow for a second? Because this man, torn between love and duty, just let the girl who saved the realm get thrown to the edge of the world. And the weight of that is crushing him. He walked the ruins of King's Landing every day now. Alone, no guards, no dragons. The city still stank of ash. People stared at him with suspicion, curiosity, and sometimes hatred. They didn't chant his name, didn't kneel, didn't thank him for peace. They saw a Targaryen, a bastard of ice and fire, the man who loved the Dragon Queen, the man who stood silent when her killer was cast out. Tyrion found him one morning outside the Red Keep, standing where the throne had once been. "You look worse than usual," Tyrion said dryly. Jon didn't answer. "Regret's a funny thing," Tyrion continued. "It rots you from the inside, quietly, like a rat in the walls." "I should have done it," Jon said finally. "Then why didn't you?" Jon looked away. "Because I was afraid I'd become her." Tyrion nodded. "And now I'm afraid I already did." The wind in the North had shifted. At first, it was just whispers, rumors carried by drunkards and traitors. But then came the silence. The kind of silence that presses on the lungs, makes the air feel heavier. Sansa could feel it long before the letters stopped arriving, before the bannermen began delaying their responses, before the Vale's envoys began missing their appointments. Arya's exile hadn't brought peace. It brought doubt, because while Arya had sailed west, her name didn't vanish. It grew, in the shadows, in secret toasts, in the words of free folk, and the quiet prayers of old gods. They called her the Blade of the North, the last Stark, the one who dared. And now, the question echoing through the North wasn't who rules. It was, why did we let them take her? Okay, quick checkpoint. Sansa's grip is slipping faster than even she realizes. And if you thought exile was a punishment, wait till you see what comes boiling out of the North. Keep watching. It's about to erupt. Jon knew something was breaking the moment he returned to Winterfell. The snow felt wrong under his boots. Too quiet, too clean. He passed no welcoming parties. No banners. Only guards who stared too long, and servants who whispered after he passed. Inside the great hall, he found Sansa at the high seat, not smiling, not pleased. You left without word, she said. I needed to see it again, Jon replied. The wall, the edge of the world. And it's still there. Silence. Then softly, so is your guilt? Jon looked away. You know what they're saying, don't you? Sansa's lips tightened. They're saying I betrayed Arya, that I sided with the South, that I let her be banished to spare war. And did you? Sansa didn't answer, because in her heart she had, not to save herself, not even to preserve peace, but to control it, to keep a war from breaking out in front of her throne. What she hadn't realized was that it had already begun beneath her feet. Jon sat. For a moment, they said nothing, just the sound of wind against the stone windows. She'll come back, Jon said finally. Sansa looked at him sharply. What makes you think that? Because we're Starks, he whispered, and we always come home. Pause. The tension between Sansa and Jon is unreal. And the prophecy? Arya's return isn't just a twist. It's a reckoning. Let's keep going. Far from Westeros, across waters so dark and deep, they seemed to swallow the stars. Arya sailed. Days passed without sight of land. Nights bled into each other. Alone with the sea, she remembered everything. Daenerys' face as the blade went in. Jon's silence. Sansa's look of cold calculation. She didn't regret it. Not really. But something gnawed at her. Not guilt. Purpose. Because for the first time in years, she didn't know what came next. She had no list. No revenge. No mask. Just exile. But the world doesn't let killers sleep forever. Because halfway through her voyage, a storm hit. A monstrous, screaming tempest that cracked the masts and snapped the sail like a ribbon. Her ship was tossed like driftwood. And when she opened her eyes again, there was no land, no sky, just endless gray. Until there wasn't. She washed ashore on an island not marked on any Westerosi map. And standing there, cloaked in white, were people she'd never seen before, but who looked at her like they had been waiting. We saw the raven, one of them said. Arya's hand went to her blade, instinctively. What raven? The woman smiled. The one death sent. Wait, what? What is this island? Who are these people? And what do they mean death sent her? This just flipped from politics to prophecy, and I'm here for it. Back in Westeros, things got worse. Word spread that Storm's End had pulled its banners from the council. Gendry, still struggling with his role as lord, refused to condemn Arya. She saved the realm, he said in open court. That cannot be treason. In the Riverlands, old Tully men refused to bend the knee. The girl bled for us, they said, and we watched them cast her away like dirt. Sansa sent letters. Tyrion drafted apologies. None of it worked. The kingdoms didn't want peace. They wanted a Stark, not one who ruled from behind a table, one who wielded a blade. The sails cut through the mist like blades. Black, unmarked, silent. They came not from the known harbors of Westeros, but from the forgotten West, where maps ended and sea monsters were still whispered about by sailors who drank too much. At first, the dock workers of Gulltown thought it was just another merchant ship blown off course. Then they saw the figure at the bow. No banners, no sigils, but everyone who looked at her froze, because Arya Stark had returned. Wait, what? Arya's back. From exile, with a ship full of strangers from beyond the known world, and no one saw it coming? This is about to change everything. She didn't announce herself, didn't send word to Winterfell or King's Landing. She walked to the port like a ghost. Hood up, steps measured. The people didn't recognize her at first. They saw a woman, pale, lean, hardened by travel. But one man did, a blacksmith, older now, scarred, and still loyal. Gendry. He stepped from the shadows of the forge, eyes locked on hers. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them carried years of silence, betrayal, and buried things. "You're supposed to be dead," he said finally. Arya shrugged. "I was supposed to be a lot of things." He moved closer, lowering his hammer. "You shouldn't be here." They already know," Arya interrupted. "The moment I stepped off that ship, ravens flew. They'll all know by morning." "And then what?" Arya's eyes darkened. "Then we see who remembers the truth, and who forgets who bled for it." "Okay, pause. Let's talk real stakes here. Arya isn't just back. She's back with purpose. And the lords of Westeros? They're about to find out what happens when you exile a Stark, and she survives. At Winterfell, the news arrived like wildfire. Sansa read the Raven 3 times. Slowly, methodically, her fingers trembled, but her face stayed still. Arya, in Gulltown, walking freely. No disguise, no hiding. "She wants him to see her," Sansa whispered. Jon stood behind her. "Good." Sansa turned. "No, Jon, it's not good. She deserves to be here. She never should have been cast out. And if the South demands her arrest again, if the council fractures..." Jon's jaw clenched. "Let them try." Sansa stepped close. "What if this isn't about justice anymore? What if she's come back for something else?" Jon met her gaze. "Like what?" Sansa didn't answer, because deep down she already knew. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, chaos bloomed. Tyrion sat at the table, raven in hand, eyes wide. Brienne stood behind him. Grey Worm paced near the window, fury on his face. "She returns, and what?" Grey Worm growled. "We forget she murdered our queen?" "She saved the realm," Brienne said calmly. "We chose exile to prevent bloodshed. She disobeyed it." "No," Tyrion murmured, finally speaking. "She rejected it." He stood slowly. "This isn't just Arya's return. It's a challenge. A quiet one. No army. No banners. Just her, daring us to call her an enemy again." Grey Worm's hand went to his sword. "Then we do." "No," Tyrion said. "We don't." "Why not?" Tyrion turned to face them, voice low. "Because if we try to touch her, the north rises. The riverlands rise. Storm's End won't stay silent. You'll start a war not over power, but over honor." "Okay," deep breath. "You feel that tension building? It's not just between kingdoms now. It's between oaths, blood, and revenge. And Arya? She hasn't even spoken to a lord yet. This is power without a crown." Chills. 3 days after landing, Arya arrived at Winterfell. No banners, no soldiers, just her. When the gates opened, the small folk didn't run. They gathered, silent, watching, because stories had reached them. The wolf who killed the dragon, the girl who walked through fire, the assassin in exile. And now she was home. Arya stepped into the courtyard, eyes scanning the familiar stone. Every inch of it held ghosts. She could still see Bran in his chair, Rickon chasing wolves, Robb training in the snow, Ned standing tall. And now just Sansa, her sister, waited on the steps. No smile, no crown. They stared at each other for a long time. And then Sansa spoke. "You shouldn't have come back." Arya nodded. But I did. The wind swept through Winterfell like it knew what was coming. Cold, sharp, unforgiving. Arya stood on the steps of the great hall, eyes fixed on Sansa. Their faces were mirrors. Two daughters of the same storm, carved by fire and blood. But something had cracked between them, something deeper than politics or pride. "You came back," Sansa said again, this time softer. Not surprise. Not welcome. Just unease. Arya didn't blink. "You sent me away." "I saved you." "No," Arya said, stepping forward. "You saved yourself." Sansa's breath hitched. "You disobeyed the realm." "I saved it." Behind them, the Stark bannermen stood frozen. Some looked at Arya with awe, others with confusion, but none with fear. She wasn't a threat to them. She was one of them, and that, more than any title, made her dangerous. "Okay, did you catch that? No army, no crown, and still Arya hold the room. Sansa's throne isn't made of swords, but it's shaking all the same. And the next move? Oh, it's coming fast." Inside the great hall, the sisters sat alone. "You knew I would come back," Arya said. "I hoped you wouldn't," Sansa replied, voice calm but tired. "Because I knew what it would mean." Arya raised a brow. "And what does it mean?" "That I'm not the only Stark the North would follow." There it was. The crack. The truth. "You want to rule," Arya said, no judgment in her voice. Just a simple, cold accuracy of a blade sliding into flesh. "And I get in the way." Sansa didn't deny it. Outside, the wind howled harder. Meanwhile, the South had made its move. A second raven arrived in King's Landing, not from the north, but from Old Town, signed with the seal of House Hightower. The message? We will not support further aggression toward House Stark. Arya's exile was unjust. We stand neutral, unless provoked. Tyrion read the letter twice. "Interesting," he whispered. Brienne glanced at him. "They're taking Arya's side?" "They're taking no one's side," Tyrion corrected, "which means they're waiting." "For what?" "For the North to decide who truly rules, and then choosing the winner." And then another raven came. From Dorne, same message. And that's when Tyrion realized this wasn't about justice anymore. This was about succession. You feel it? The political fault lines are shifting. The southern houses don't trust the South. And Arya? She's not fighting for a crown, but they're about to offer her one anyway. Jon stood in the Winterfell crypt, staring at the stone of Ned Stark. "She's back," he muttered. No one answered. Of course. Just cold stone, old dust, and memories that didn't fade. "She did what I couldn't," Jon whispered. "She saved them, but they hate her for it." He knelt, and I stood there, said nothing. A voice behind him spoke. "Because you knew she didn't need you to." Jon turned. It was Bran. He didn't walk now. He didn't blink much either. Just watched. "Is this why you never stopped her?" Jon asked. Bran's voice was soft. "Because I knew she would return." Jon frowned. "You wanted her to come back?" "No," Bran said. "But Westeros did." Okay. Bran dropping prophecy bombs out of nowhere. "This is bigger than politics now. Arya's return isn't just personal. It's fated. And if she stays, the entire balance of power tips. Back in the North, things boiled over. A feast was called. Not a celebration. A test. Every northern lord was summoned. Every house, great or small. The hall filled with meat, mead, and murmurs. Sansa sat at the head table. But so did Arya. No title. No seat claimed. She simply walked up, pulled out a chair beside her sister, and sat. And no one stopped her. The room fell silent. Then Glover stood. "Lady Sansa," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "You've ruled well." Sansa nodded. "Thank you. But we follow House Stark," Glover continued. "All of it." His eyes turned to Arya. "We followed your sister when she faced the Dragon Queen. We followed your sister when she left the known world. And now we ask, does she follow you or do you follow her?" The question was a sword, and the hall held its breath. Sansa looked at Arya. Arya looked at the people, then finally said, I don't want a throne. I never did. But Glover stepped forward. That's why we'd follow you. Holy, guys, the North just openly challenged Sansa in her own hall. And Arya? She didn't even ask for it. This is leadership by legend. The people are choosing the blade over the crown. And Sansa? Her grip is slipping by the second. Snow fell over the crownlands like ash. Winter, real winter, had arrived, not the soft chill of autumn, but the kind that bites through armor and settles in bone. The kind of cold that reminded even kings and queens that their thrones meant nothing to the dead. Robb Stark marched through it anyway. The northern host had crossed the Trident in silence. No fanfare, no banners, only purpose. Every man in the army knew what awaited in the south. Fire from dragons, treachery from lions, and traps buried in the very streets of King's Landing. But they marched for the Riverlands, for the North, for every child who had burned beneath dragon fire. At the front rode Robb, flanked by Ned and the Greyjohn, their horses wrapped in thick wool and steel. They had 20,000 strong behind them, and a promise to bring the war to the gates of the capital. Ahead lay the Blackwater, and beyond it, madness. In the Red Keep, Cersei waited. She wore her finest black gown, wine-red jewels at her throat, hair wound tight in golden braids. On the surface, she was regal, unbothered, unbroken. But inside, she was a storm. She had spies in every inn, assassins hiding among merchants, alchemists preparing the last barrels of wildfire, and Qyburn, ever at her side, whispering plans darker than shadow. When they come, she said, standing over the map room where dragons and wolves were just painted ink, we let them breach the walls, let them taste victory. And then, Qyburn asked softly, then we bury them all. Daenerys arrived first. Her dragon circled the capital in long, terrifying sweeps, wings casting shadows that stretched over rooftops and marketplaces. But she did not strike. Not yet. Instead, she camped outside the city, south of the Blackwater, and waited for Robb Stark to arrive. Her Unsullied formed perfect lines. The Dothraki patrolled the hills. Behind them, the river lords who had bent the knee to her cause. And beside her, Grey Worm, Missandei, and Daario prepared for siege. But Daenerys was done waiting. This time, she summoned Robb. They met on neutral ground, under a tent of black and red silk. Ned stood with Robb, his face worn and wary. Daenerys stood with Jorah and Grey Worm, her eyes cold as the falling snow. There's no need for us to be enemies, she said. Not when the throne is within our grasp. Robb's reply was sharp. You burned our villages. That makes you our enemy. Daenerys didn't blink. I brought justice. The lords you protected defied my rule. I only returned what fire owed them. Then fire is blind, Ned said. A long silence followed. Then Daenerys stepped forward. Just once. Kneel. Join me. We end Cersei's reign together. And afterward, we rebuild the realm with fire and ice. Robb stared into her eyes and saw what Ned had warned him about months ago. Not just ambition, but the same gleam Ares had once worn. The same belief that power made her right. I won't kneel, Robb said, but I will fight with you. Daenerys raised a brow. You just said I was your enemy. You are, Robb replied, but Cersei is everyone's. That night, under a snow-choked moon, two armies moved. The North and the Targaryens, once enemies, now circled the city from two sides. Inside the Red Keep, Cersei watched from her balcony, her lips drawn tight. They think they have surrounded us, she whispered. Qyburn said nothing. She looked down at the winding streets, the towers filled with wildfire, the hidden soldiers dressed as beggars and bakers and blacksmiths. No, she said, they have walked into a tomb. Jon Snow arrived on the second night. He rode through the snow on a white steed, Ghost beside him, his face pale and raw from the northern wind. Sansa rode with him, flanked by Knights of the Vale, armored in silver and sky blue. When Robb saw them, something cracked his chest, not fear, not joy, but the weight of something larger than blood. You came, Robb said. Jon didn't smile. You need me? Robb glanced toward the walls of King's Landing. We need each other. Jon leaned close. You don't see it yet, do you? See what? Jon looked toward the south, toward the woods where no army camped, where the snow fell heavier than it should have. They're coming! At dawn, the first trebuchet loosed its stone. It flew over the Blackwater like a shadow and smashed into the outer wall of the city, cracking stone and bone alike. Trumpets blew from both camps. Dragons shrieked overhead. And inside King's Landing, wildfire lit the first tunnel. The siege had begun. The first explosion shook the ground like a god's roar. Green fire burst through the lower slums of King's Landing, sending carts, bodies, and rooftops into the sky. Screams followed, thousands echoing off the walls like a chorus of the damned. Men from both Robb's host and Daenerys' forces watched in horror as smoke and flame devoured whole streets. It wasn't a counterattack. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Cersei Lannister had lit the match. Robb stared from the rise overlooking the eastern gate, knuckles white around his sword hilt. She's burning her own people. Ned's voice was grim. She's telling us what awaits if we take the city. On the opposite hill, Daenerys stood beside Drogon, her eyes locked on the rising green smoke. She didn't speak. She simply mounted, and Drogon rose. With one scream, the dragon launched toward the Red Keep, its wings blotting out the sun. The air turned hot and angry, wind and ash sweeping across both camps. Soldiers scattered. Arrows flew in every direction, but none reached the sky in time. Drogon dove. His fire was red, not green, his fury ancient. And this time, it was aimed not at soldiers, but at Cersei's tower. The Red Keep ignited. Stone cracked. Windows shattered. The Queen's tower glowed with heat from within. But Cersei did not flee. She stood at her balcony, wine in hand, face lit by the inferno, and whispered, "Let it all burn." Then the second vault of wildfire exploded, this one beneath Flea Bottom. Jon Snow shoved through the chaos in the streets, Ghost at his side, steel drawn. He had ridden into the city with the Veiled Knights before the first blast. Now, those knights were either dead or scattered. The air was thick with smoke, screams, and the smell of burning flesh. He wasn't looking for Cersei. He wasn't even looking for Daenerys. He was looking for the dead. The snow had begun to fall heavier, thicker than it should have in the capital. The air had gone cold, unnaturally cold, even beneath fire. And then he saw them. At the southern gate, where no army was camped, shadows emerged from the fog, silent, pale, eyes glowing like stars swallowed by ice. The dead had arrived. Jon's voice caught in his throat. "No!" Ghost growled low, every hair on his body bristling. He ran. Robb didn't know why the temperature dropped, but he felt it. His breath began to show in the air. The mud under his boots froze. The fire in the city roared on, but it was battling something older, something worse. A scout galloped up to him, face streaked with ash and horror. "From the south, my lord, they're coming from the Godswood." "What army?" Robb barked. The man shook his head. "No banners, no torches, just death." Daenerys stood atop the Red Keep, Drogon's wings shielding her from the fire below. The tower cracked beneath them, stones sliding loose into flame-choked air. And then she saw them too. White walkers, dozens of them, emerging from the ruins of the southern gate like ghosts resurrected. At their rear came the dead. Wildlings, crows, villagers, all claimed and twisted by the long night. It wasn't a siege anymore. It was extinction. In the Red Keep's throne room, Cersei sat on the Iron Throne, wine still in hand, Qyburn pacing nervously beside her. "My queen," he said, voice trembling. "There's something outside the city, something not human." She didn't look at him. She just said, "Good." Qyburn stared. "What?" "Let them kill each other," she muttered. "Then I'll be the last one left. The walkers don't kneel, your grace." Cersei smiled, bitter and broken. "Then we'll see if they bleed." Jon reached the gate as the first wight crossed the threshold. He cut it down instantly, one clean stroke, and turned to face the flood behind it. There were too many. He screamed, fall back to the keep." But there was no order in the city now. Only fire and ice. Only panic. He turned, searching for Daenerys. She was already in the air, Drogon swooping low, torching waves of dead. But for every corpse that burned, 3 more rose from the alleyways, from the sewers, from the ash. Jon ran toward the September Baylor, toward higher ground, toward a final stand. In the field beyond the city, Robb pulled back his armies. "They're not our enemy," he shouted to his men. "Don't fight the dragons. Fight what's coming through that fog." And the Northmen turned, wolves and dragons, old enemies now bound by something worse. Far to the north, the wall stood silent, and on its highest point, Bran Stark opened his eyes. 1,000 ravens burst into the sky, and the Night King smiled. The sun rose slowly over King's Landing, spilling golden light over red stone and old wounds. For the first time in what felt like ages, the city wasn't screaming. No bells, no fires, just a strange, heavy quiet, like the realm itself was holding its breath. Arya Stark stood on the balcony of the Red Keep, staring down at the capital she had once walked through in ash. Now it was whole again, but not healed, not yet. Behind her, the chamber stirred. Tyrion, Sam, Brienne, Gendry all gathered, waiting for the answer that could break or bind the 7 kingdoms forever. And Bran, unmoving, unblinking. "Before we begin," Tyrion said, "I need to know, are you staying?" Arya turned, her face unreadable. "No." They all froze. "I didn't come to take power," she said. "I came to make sure no one like Daenerys ever gets it again." Sam nodded slowly. "Then help us build something better." "I'll speak," Arya replied. "Once." "Okay, this is huge. Arya isn't staying, but she's going to shape the rules for who does. This is the moment Westeros either resets or breaks for good." That afternoon, every lord, lady, and leader gathered in the throne room. What remained of it? No throne, no banners, just stone, scorched and silent. Arya stood in the center. "I've walked across this realm," she said, "seen kings rise and fall, queens burn and be burned. None of them saved the people. None of them deserved the songs." The hall stayed silent. "Ruling should not be a birthright," she continued. "It should be earned, and it should end when it fails." She turned to Bran. "If we must have a king, make it one who does want to be king." Bran said nothing. "But better than thrones," Arya said, her voice growing, "is choice. Let the kingdoms choose who they follow. Not every decade, not every rebellion, but always." She looked at Tyrion. "You want to avoid another war? Stop crowning tyrants." Boom. She's not giving them peace. She's giving them accountability. And Tyrion? He knows it's the only way Westeros survives. Sansa stepped forward next. "I will remain queen in the north," she said, "but I will honor Arya's words. The north will choose its own path, with or without a throne." Yara Greyjoy followed, and the Iron Islands will do the same. One by one, the houses spoke. Dorne, the Vale, the Reach, not rebellion, not independence. Self-rule, guided by councils. Chosen leaders. No more Iron Thrones. No more Dragonfire Kings. A new Westeros, not ruled by one, shared by many. And just like that, the realm bent but didn't break. It reformed. And Arya? She stepped back, her work done, or so she thought. That night, as Arya prepared to leave the city, Jon found her by the docks. "Is it over?" he asked. Arya didn't look back. "It's never over." He walked with her in silence. The wind tasted of salt and smoke. "They'll write songs," he said. "They always do. But they'll leave out the part where you were exiled." Arya smirked. "Good. Let them wonder." He stopped walking. "Where will you go?" She paused, hand on the railing of the ship. "West." Jon frowned. "Still chasing what's beyond the map?" "No," Arya whispered. "I'm chasing what hasn't broken me yet." He didn't argue. He just nodded, because deep down he understood. They were both too scarred to stay. "You feel that? This isn't just an ending. It's a passing of the torch. Arya walks into the unknown not as a fugitive, but as a founder of a new world. As the ship pulled away, the sails catching the wind, Arya stood alone on the deck. No mask, no armor, just a Stark with 1,000 miles behind her, and all the mystery of the world ahead. And on the shore, watching from the rocks, Bran spoke one final time. She was never part of the game, he said. She was the piece that flipped the board. Tyrion looked at him. And what happens now? Bran blinked slowly. Now we play something new. Snow fell gently on the walls of Winterfell, the flakes drifting like feathers from a sky that had finally stopped screaming. The north was quiet now, not from fear, but from something far rarer, peace. Not the peace declared in Raven scrolls or claimed by men in council chambers, but real peace. Earned, fragile, alive. Jon Snow walked alone through the Godswood. No crown, no title, just a man with too many ghosts, and a silence in his chest where duty used to be. He paused beneath the heart tree, red leaves rustling above him like whispers from another life. He remembered Ned's voice. The man who passes a sentence should swing the sword. He had done that too many times. And then Arya had done it for him. He had hated her for it, then loved her for it. And now he was just proud. Back in the great hall, Sansa sat on the high seat, but there was no crown on her head today. Not after Arya's return. Not after the people's chant. Instead, a simple direwolf banner hung behind her, tattered, old, and true. She had listened to Arya's words, not just in the throne room, but in the silence between them. She had seen what the North really needed. Not rulers, protectors. She didn't call herself queen anymore. The North called her Lady Sansa, and that was enough. Decisions were now made by council. Every bannerman had a voice. Even small folk were given a place to speak. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And in Westeros, that was revolutionary. Okay. Sansa shedding the crown voluntarily? That's not weakness. That's leadership. The North just became the first land in Westeros ruled by consensus. All because of Arya's shadow. Far beyond the map's edge, Arya sailed on. Days turned into weeks. Then months. She passed islands no maester had ever written about. Saw beasts with no names. Cultures that didn't kneel, didn't conquer, didn't care about bloodlines or dragon fire. She kept moving, but the past didn't stay behind. One night, on a rocky shore, she saw a child wearing a wolf carved in wood. She asked where he got it. He said, from the trader, the girl who sailed west with no flag but fire in her eyes. Arya almost smiled. Her legend had gotten there before she did. Back in Storm's End, Gendry watched the sea from his tower. Every night, no raven ever came. But he never stopped waiting, because he knew one day a sail with no banner would rise from the horizon, and it would be her. Jon stood at the wall again. The new wall, not rebuilt for war, but to keep stories alive. The Night's Watch wasn't about punishment anymore. It had become a refuge. A place for those with nowhere else to go. Former soldiers, orphans, wildlings, even former enemies. They followed Jon, not because they had to, because they chose to. He never gave speeches, never took titles, but they called him Snow of the Second Dawn, and he never corrected them. And Bran ruled what remained of the South, but barely. The Iron Throne was never rebuilt. When they offered him the crown again, he declined. He said, the world must govern itself now. He did not build statues. He did not carve his name in stone. But every year, he sent one raven, always the same direction, always unanswered, always west. And finally, back across the sea, one day, Arya stood at the edge of a cliff, far from any known land. She looked at the sky. No map could chart her course. No book would write her ending. But as the wind howled behind her and the waves slammed against the rocks, she whispered one name, not hers, but the one that made her everything, Stark. She turned and walked forward, into the unknown,